Hey, did you know that during World War II, Nazi Germany sent secret agents to American shores? They landed quietly on a Long Island beach in the dead of night, with orders to blow up factories, power plants, and railroads. It was one of the boldest spy missions of the war, but thanks to a twist of fate and a little bit of human error, it collapsed before it really even began. This is the story of Operation Pastorius. Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode of Hey Did You Know, where we dig up the weird, the forgotten, and downright strange corners of America. It's June 1942. The war in Europe rages on. Nazi Germany has conquered much of the continent, but the United States has just entered the war following Pearl Harbor. In response to America's declaration of war on him, Adolf Hitler authorized a mission to sabotage the American war effort and attack civilian targets. He gave the mission to a German admiral by the name of Wilhelm Canaris, who, back in World War I, had organized the sabotage of a French installation in Morocco, and other German agents had entered the United States to attack New York, which was known as the Black Tom explosion, which I guess I could do an episode on that, maybe, but just a little bit of history on that. It happened in 1916. The United States hadn't even entered World War I yet. These soldiers just came over here, I guess, in anticipation to us coming, make us not that strong when we did enter, if we did enter. The New York Harbor was what was targeted. 7 people died, and hundreds more were wounded, of course. The Statue of Liberty got damaged, and it was known as one of the largest artificial non-nuclear explosions in American history. So that's something that I could dive into in another episode if you guys want to hear about that. But back to Operation Pastorius, the story at hand. Hitler chose Wilhelm because he orchestrated these 2 previously successful operations. And when Wilhelm put together Operation Pastorius, he hoped that it would be just as successful, which it wasn't, or we wouldn't be here right now, of course. But he had wanted to target factories, bridges, rail lines, anything really that would cripple America's war effort. He recruited 8 men for this project, trained them all up. They underwent sabotage training in Berlin. They were previous residents of the United States, or at least they lived there. Can't say if they're illegal or not, but they lived in America for a little while, particularly the 2 that we're going to be talking about today. But before I get into that, you guys might be wondering, why was this mission named Operation Pastorius? Well, it was named after Franz Daniel Pastorius. And he was a German who actually founded the first ever German settlement in America back in 1683, which he ironically named Germantown. It was located in Pennsylvania, so this ended up being another Pennsylvania story, just like the previous one in the last episode. But yeah, so Francis Pastorius, lived in Germany, and somewhere between 1671 and 1677, he was visited by William Penn, who was visiting Germany on behalf of the Quaker faith, and it resulted in him ended up moving to the United States. He got on the ship, got to the United States by 1683. That's just a number I pulled out of my head. That could be correct, could not be correct. Purchased 15,000 acres of land from William Penn, and began his settlement known as, again, Germantown, where he would live until he died. He served on many of the governmental boards. He was the first mayor of Germantown, and so on and so forth. But this isn't Francis's story. This is a German story. So this 8 men, they were trained. They were ready to go take on the United States. They were trained how to use explosive, incendiary devices, timing devices, learned how to use all this stuff. And they were put on boats and sent off to the United States. One team, a team of 4, because there was 8 of them, so a team of 4 was sent to Long Island. Well, New York, but they landed in Long Island. In the early hours of June 13th, 1942, a German U-boat surfaced off the coast of Long Island near Amagansett, carrying 4 of the 8 saboteurs. They came onto the beach wearing their uniforms so that if they were captured, they would be classified as prisoners of war instead of spies, but they quickly changed into their normal civilian clothes and began burying all their explosive devices and the uniforms that they arrived in and set out to start their normal lives and cause havoc. Now, a couple days later, the other team before, in case you'd like to know, they landed in Florida near Jacksonville at Ponte Vedra Beach. Their time was wonderful. They got off their boats, got to work, or they had already started their mission. But in New York, in Long Island, things weren't going as well. After changing into their civilian clothes, the men scrambled onto the beach, and they were spotted by a young U.S. Coast Guardsman by the name of John Cullen. Cullen was on his nightly routine patrol along the beach when he came across the men, and he asked them who they were because there's these random men on his beach that he has no idea who they are. The team's leader, George John Datch, remember that name, he claimed that he and his team were just some beach fishermen. After a little bit of back and forth, Datch eventually offered Cullen $300 as a bribe, instructed him to forget who he was, forget what he had seen, leave, go home, go on about your day, nothing to see here. So Cullen said, all right, sure, give me the money. And turns out it was only $260. It wasn't even the whole $300. But he made his way back to the Coast Guard station, and he proceeded to go and report the encounter anyway, even though he had just taken the money. So, good guy Cullen over here. An armed patrol the next day returned to the site and found everything that had been buried upon their arrival, but the Germans were gone. They had taken the Long Island Railroad from the Mangasset station and went into Manhattan, and by the next morning the saboteurs had vanished into the crowds of New York City. But the FBI was on high alert. Posters went up, agents worked overtime, and quite honestly, this had become one of the largest manhunts in American history. And still, this mission didn't fail because the FBI put on such a large manhunt for them. It failed because of betrayal. Big, bad betrayal. George Datch, talked about him earlier, the team's leader, he had second thoughts. Many experts believe that he had intended to defect to America the whole time, which makes sense to me because during my research, I realized, I looked him up himself instead of just the whole operation, but I did research into him as well. And in the 1920s, he had actually lived illegally in the United States, working in several restaurants around New York City, and even spent some time in Miami. Like I said, these men were chosen because apparently they all 8 of them had spent some time in the United States at some point in their time. But Datch specifically, he had served in the U.S. military until the late 30s when he did decide to return to Germany. So, quite honestly, maybe he just was tired of Germany and wanted to return back to the United States. Who knows? But a few days after landing, Datch had invited one of his team's most devout members, Ernest Berger, into his hotel room, and because he wanted to include him in the plans that he had to go to the FBI. On the 15th of June, Datch had phoned the New York office of the FBI and gave his name as Franz Pastorius. Again, the man who this was named after to begin with. He said, hey, I just broke into the United States and I'm gonna bomb some stuff. But nobody believed him. So what did he do? He did the next best thing. He took a train all the way to Washington, D.C. and walked straight in to the FBI headquarters. And when he was there, he told the exact same story, gave the same name, and still everybody laughed him off, nobody believed him. And it wasn't until he came across the assistant director of the time, D.M. Ladd, and showed that he had more than $80,000 with him on his person. And then they took him a little bit more seriously. So after some time, they all talked, and Datch handed over the names and locations of all the people that were a part of this scheme to destroy the American war efforts. And within 10 days, all 8 would-be saboteurs were in custody. Datch was sure that he would be hailed as an American hero for exposing the plot, but the FBI, as usual, had other plans for Datch. J. Edgar Hoover, which you guys may know, the FBI director at the time, he made no mention of Datch when, doing his reporting and being interviewed by newspapers and whoever else interviewed people at the time. He made no mention of George Datch at all, and actually claimed all of the credit for the FBI capturing the saboteurs, which of course was not at all what George Datch was expecting to happen. He thought that he, like I said, would be this great guy that saved America. That's what he was expecting. But all 8 of the men were taken to trial in Washington, D.C., and they were put in front of a military tribunal, which was the first time that this had happened since Abraham Lincoln's assassin was taken to court. They were all found guilty of 4 charges around the laws of war and espionage, and all 8 men were sentenced to death. The FBI director, Edgar Hoover, and Attorney General Francis Biddle appealed to the president, Roosevelt, who commuted the sentences to life imprisonment for Berger and 30 years for Dash, due to them cooperating, giving everybody up, whatever you want to call it, snitching. But the others were all executed in an electric chair in Washington, D.C. in August of 1942. In 1948, now the current president, Harry Truman, had both Berger and Datch released. Like I said, Berger was supposed to be sentenced to life. He was going to be there forever, but Datch had only gotten 30 years, so they ended up both getting released and deported to the American occupation zone. So in the end, they really did get to be in America, but it was just the Allied occupied Germany portion of America. So you get what you get. A win here, a win there, right? And now it's also 1948. The war is over, and these men are regarded as traitors because they caused death to their friends. They gave up 6 of their friends to be killed in the United States. So, of course, they're not really that popular once they do return to Germany. Both men were promised pardons by Hoover, but they never received them. They both ended up dying before they could receive any sort of pardon from him. George Dash, though, ended up writing a book on his involvement in Operation Pastorius titled 8 Spies Against America. And he ended up living to be 89 years old and ended up dying in 1991. So he lived a pretty long life. How his life was spent, I don't know. Didn't research that much into him, but he did live a pretty long life. He lived to be 89, so what are you going to do? I don't know too much about Berger. I didn't really look into him much. This really seemed like a Datch story since he was the team leader. So I really wanted to tell his story. I guess, his more of his information was out there because of the story that he wrote. Not too sure. But yeah, so that's the story on Operation Pastorius. I hope it made sense to you. I hope you enjoyed it. But in the end, it wasn't explosives that stopped the mission, and it wasn't a firefight. It was human choice. 2 men decided to defect, and in doing so, sealing the fate of their friends. 6 men were executed, 2 were spared. So, next time you're walking along a quiet beach, imagine a U-boat surfacing in the night, and strangers in uniforms wading through the surf with duffel bags of explosives. And remember, even in moments of great danger, it can be the smallest encounters, a lone Coast Guardman, a single confession, that changes the course of events. Had Cullen not told his friends what happened, the United States could have had a way different experience in World War II. Who knows what could have happened? But that's the story. And I want to say, friends, thank you so much again for listening to another episode. Episode number 2 of Hey Did You Know? If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. And don't forget to like wherever you're watching this. Hit the follow button so you don't miss another strange and unbelievable story. Thank you so much. And again, until next time, goodbye, friends.